Hello everyone, it's me, your average bonehead, Jay, and we are finally back. Yeah, sorry about that hiatus at the end of the year, I had to take a little break. But now we are back to our regularly scheduled program, and to kick off our new year on a good note, I'm going to be talking about, once again, The Loud House. As many of you know by now, The Loud House is a show that I praise quite a bit. Plus, you guys seem to really like it when I talk about this show. However, despite all the praise I could possibly give it, there is one major hang-up I have with the show. And that's, things don't really change that much. They don't evolve. Now don't get me wrong, I know exactly why this is. The Loud House by design is not a serialized show, it's meant to be episodic so viewers can just jump in at any time and not be confused. That's why no matter how crazy an episode ends, things seem to just reset in the next episode. Now there is some continuity as the lessons will be remembered and characters will return most of the time, but other than that, the show doesn't truly have any arcs. Until recently, that is. Because during the summer of last year, the show aired its first true multi-part arc. It took them 7 seasons to do it. The Road Trip arc. In this arc, the entire Loud family, minus the pets, went on a multi-episode trip around the country, with each episode building off the last one. And overall, I think this arc was pretty good. But which episode was the best? Well, that's what we're here to find out today. So sit back and watch as I rank all 7 episodes of the Loud House Road Trip arc. Though, as usual, a couple disclaimers. 1, once again, this ranking is opinion-based. And 2, since there's only 7 episodes in this arc, this video will be a worst to best ranking. So, let's get right into it. Number 7. One thing you should all know is that all 7 episodes in this arc are good, at the bare minimum. And I say that because this episode manages to just barely be good.
What do you say? You guys up for a summer-long adventure? I do!
Bizarratorium. This is the first episode of the arc, and, well, it's an episode. This episode is the only double-length episode in the whole arc also, so you'd think that means it would use all 22 of those minutes to the fullest. Well, the plot is that Rita is assigned by her boss to go to various locations across the country and report on certain places and events. So she brings home an RV that Lisa and Lana upgrade so it can fit all 13 of them for their road trip across the United States. Meanwhile, though, Lincoln wants to go to a roadside attraction known as the Bizarratorium and comes up with a plan to make sure that his family can go there without interfering with Rita's schedule. He succeeds, but unfortunately the Bizarratorium has since closed down and they go off to continue on their journey. But not before Lincoln secretly takes a ring that he didn't know was cursed, which ends up plaguing the family with bad luck. No, not again. No! The bad luck consistently slows them down throughout their journey, but once they figure out what's causing it, Lucy performs a seance to give back the cursed ring. Unfortunately though, due to this detour, they miss the event that was going on in their first location, Niagara Falls, and Rita gets in trouble for it. But Lincoln takes the blame and explains to his mom's boss what happened, and she's so amazed by the idea of them running into a ghost that she tells Rita that she doesn't have to worry about going to the specific stops anymore, and their family can just go to wherever because something interesting is bound to happen. And the episode ends on that note. Yeah, I think you can clearly see the first problem with this episode. This is basically 2 plots mashed together. Honestly, this should have just been 2 11-minute episodes, with part 1 being the whole setting up to go on the trip, and part 2 being the whole Bizarratorium plot. I feel like it would have flowed a lot better. But despite being 2 plots mashed together, the pacing is surprisingly slow in this episode. It takes a long time before it clicks to the family that they're cursed, which then takes even more time to get everything for Lucy's seance. And to keep adding on to my list of complaints with this episode, the main plot is just a run-of-the-mill Lincoln wants something episode and tries to get it, and then learns that he can't have it. We've seen this type of episode hundreds of times in the past. Though to be positive about this episode, I basically consider it to be a good version of No Such Luck, even though that's not really a high bar to cross. Yeah, a few of the episodes in this arc are kinda just retreads of old episodes. You might as well call them fanfictions of those old episodes at this point, which is why I'm going to rate some of those episodes on the fanficometer, where I rank fanfictions on a scale of eviscerated the original, which goes to Wreck-It Ralph 2, or a complete disgrace to the very concept of existence that everyone involved should be ashamed of, where I happily put the 3 Little Princesses. So where does the Bizarratorium rank on this? I think that's good. I mean, at least the family didn't ostracize Lincoln and tried to help him in this episode. But also one more positive from this episode is I still think it's a good start to the arc in terms of getting us to understand how these episodes are going to play out. Being, they go to a location and something crazy happens, which makes a lot of sense. So what do you know? The worst episode of the arc is still decent. Number 6.
Cool. Definitely rocky. Sweet.
Mountain Hard Pass. This one is only ranked above Bizarratorium because the plot is more cohesive. This is another one that's decent, but nothing special. The plot is that for this next stop, Rita and Lin Sr. want to take the kids onto a mountain hike, but the kids don't want to. So they systematically try to sabotage the hike to make them go back to the RV, but Rita and Lin Sr. manage to overcome each of the obstacles, until the kids manage to cause a big enough problem that puts the whole family in peril. But using the lessons their parents taught them earlier in the episode, they're able to successfully and safely get back to the RV with little problem. And they learn to like what their parents were trying to make them do. Yeah, this episode is just a simple, kids don't like a thing their parents like, they end up going on a quote-unquote crazy adventure, and then at the end they learn to like it. This episode is basically just a rushed version of Camped, which was obviously a much better episode. So in other words, Mountain Hard Pass goes here on the fanfic-o-meter. But on top of being a retread of an old episode, this episode just goes through the motions. There's no real character in this episode with literally anything. It's not even that funny of an episode. And the ending is very, very rushed. Though, to be positive, I do think the goats that antagonize the family are actually pretty funny, and my favorite part of the episode is in the beginning where we can see Lincoln and Lana gaming together, and that's good continuity to Game Off, which is a much better episode I'd rather be watching. Yeah, that's all I got to say about this one. I guess you can say the episode is rocky. Number 5.
Wait, is that?
Huh? Rita? Is that you?
Brad Plaid?
From Brad to Worse. Giving a compliment first to this episode, despite it still being in the lower half of the ranking, I love that this episode gives us Rita lore, which is not really something we get that much in the show if I'm remembering correctly. What is that lore exactly? Well, stop me if you heard a plot summary like this before. During this stop of the road trip, they're at a country fair, where they end up running into an old childhood friend of Rita, Brad, and the two of them catch up. But seeing due to the fact that, of course, Brad is damn near perfect in every way, Lin Sr. feels threatened that Brad is going to try taking back Rita and even the kids, as some of them are even being won over by him. So Lin Sr. and Lincoln team up to try and make Brad look like a fool, but ultimately it turns out it was all just some big misunderstanding, and Lin Sr. apologizes to Brad, and Brad is happy that Rita and Lin Sr. are together. Yeah, it's one of those stories where married man thinks wife's childhood friend is trying to steal her back. I'm honestly shocked it took this long for the show to do this type of plot, and it's about as by the numbers as it can get. Despite that though, I actually like this episode quite a bit, at least more than the others, and my main reasoning for liking it is actually kind of from the twist of the episode. When we learned that a bunch of Brad's songs are about Rita, my mind came up with two options of what the twist could be. Option 1, Brad is evil, or option 2, he's talking about some other girl named Rita. I wasn't expecting it to be option 3, he's singing about his horse Rita, who is named after his grandmother.
I named her after my granny, Margarita. Why, she'd eat an apple right out your hand. Granny, not the horse.
Now that's the type of absurd comedy I like from this show. On top of that, Lin Sr. is as entertaining as always, and once again it's always nice seeing the two boys of the family team up, which surprisingly rarely ever happens in this show. And I do like the ending where Lin Sr. and Brad are performing together. So yeah, despite its cliche plot, I do think this episode is deserving of being ranked as number 5 on this list out of 7. Number 4.
There he is! I didn't lose Mr. Coconuts. He was puppet napped.
Doll Day Afternoon. This one gets the middle ranking because this is the one I'm the most split on. The plot is that after a pit stop at a truck stop, Luann ends up realizing that her ventriloquist dummy, Mr. Coconuts, has gone missing. So they turn around, and when they get back to the truck stop, they look at the security cameras and find out that Mr. Coconuts wasn't misplaced, he was taken. And on a side note, I love this joke from Lola.
This is gonna be our whole day, isn't it?
So they go on a Wild Wild West goose chase to track down and chase down the doll napper. And after finally cornering him, they find out that he was Mr. Coconuts' original creator. And we actually get the backstory of how Luann even got Mr. Coconuts in the first place. How crazy must it be to be in some random town in Michigan where you lose your prized ventriloquist dummy, only to find him many years later in some random truck stop on Route 66 in the possession of some random teenage girl who has built an entire entertainment company off of him. Upon learning this, Luann decides to give Mr. Coconuts back, and it looks like that's how the episode is going to end, but of course because of status quo obligations, the man gives Mr. Coconuts back. That's where a personal gripe that I'm always back and forth with myself on comes from, is that a part of me kinda wishes that Luann did give up Mr. Coconuts permanently. It would have been pretty interesting to see how she deals with this throughout the rest of the series. I mean, he doesn't have to be gone permanently. A few episodes later, they can run into the guy again and he gives Mr. Coconuts back. I just think it would have been interesting to do with Luann's character. But on the other hand, I do get the show status quo obligations, and on the other hand, even though they don't mention him, Luann does use Mr. Coconuts to bond with her boyfriend Benny, and that little dynamic between the two is something that I find to be very sweet and wouldn't want to change for the world. So that's all okay, but the real thing that leaves me split when it comes to this episode is this episode doesn't really take advantage of the arc that it's in. Unlike all the other episodes, which at bare minimum kind of play into the fact that the arc is about the Louds on a road trip, this one feels the most like you could have just did it in Royal Woods and nothing would change. Not even the whole cowboy Wild West setting, because they could have easily just ended up having them drive there anyways, normally, and it wouldn't have changed much of the plot. So in turn, this episode, while okay and kind of important to Luann's character, kind of comes off as pointless because of the arc it's stuck in. And to me, that's the episode's biggest flaw, and it's why it's only number 4 on this list, and not any higher. Because I do love Luann's character in this episode. I love seeing her determination, I especially love seeing her backstory, and even though she got Mr. Coconuts at the end, I do still find it pretty mature of her to be willing to give him up if it meant someone else would be happy. And it just helps add on to Luann's good streak of episodes. I said Luann's good streak of episodes, not whoever the hell that is. Also, I'd be remiss not to mention the FNAF reference. And allow me to go on a little side tangent here. I kind of wish this episode was more about them dealing with a FNAF style restaurant. It would kind of be like how the Bizarratorium was a roadside attraction, and this would be a roadside attraction that they ran into and had to deal with the creepy animatronics. Kind of like what the show Glitch Text did, which, yes, I will be talking about that show eventually. But this is just me spitballing here, because overall, I still consider this to be a good episode. Number 3.
Sweet! When do we get to see the Casa Grandes? I can't wait to tell Ronnie Ann all about our trip.
Hide and Sneak. This episode is the grand finale of the arc, as in it, the Louds have reached their final destination, Great Lakes City. And of course, the rest of the family, especially Lincoln and Lori, are excited to see the Casa Grandes, Ronnie Ann and Bobby's extended family. But unfortunately, Rita fears that if they meet with the Casa Grandes, they'll get distracted, and then Rita won't be able to finish her article in time. So they spend the entire episode hiding from the Casa Grandes until they accidentally stumble into their building, and have no choice but to confess what they were doing. But luckily it doesn't take long for all of them to be forgiven, and the episode and the arc ends with the Louds and the Casa Grandes having dinner together.
Everybody got that?
Yeah, if it's not obvious, this is by far the dumbest and most easily fixable plot in the entire arc. Like, why didn't they just call up the Casa Grandes and tell them that they couldn't hang out? I'm pretty sure they would understand. They're surprisingly very understanding people. Or, you know, there's no reason why all of them have to go to these locations. They can just let Lincoln, Lori, and the other Loud siblings go hang out with their friends. Or, you know, ask the Casa Grandes to take them to these locations so they can hang out with them. There's nothing really stopping them from doing that. On top of that, the Casa Grandes themselves, despite being an episode that's kind of about them, they barely appear in this episode. Like, they're in it, but we don't get any true interactions with them. I get it, they're trying to avoid the Casa Grandes, but still. I mean, yeah, I don't care for them that much, but I do like it when they interact with the Louds, as the personalities all bounce off each other pretty well. And finally, my biggest, and this is my most personal annoyance with the episode, Ronnie Ann does not speak at all throughout this episode. All the other Casa Grandes that they were trying to avoid do speak, but Ronnie Ann does not. I have no idea why they do this, but ever since her spin-off show was cancelled, the Casa Grandes only appear in the Loud House once in like a blue moon, and for some reason, it's even rarer for Ronnie Ann to actually say something in these episodes, despite being the main character of the spin-off. And honestly, I don't know why the show consistently does this. It's almost like they're trying to scrub her out for some reason, and I really hope that's not the reason. However, this episode is number 3 on the list for a reason, as there are many positives. For one, despite my criticisms of the plot of the episode, it's still a funny episode. A lot of the jokes really got me. And once again, even though we don't see them that frequently and Ronnie Ann doesn't talk, seeing the Casagrandes at all is still fun, and I absolutely love the ending where they're all together. Like I said before many times in the past, the Casagrandes are at their best when they're interacting with the Louds. All of the personalities of the characters get to bounce off each other pretty well, even if it's not for long in this episode. And overall, despite everything in this episode, I still think it's a nice conclusion for the entire arc. It's pretty natural to end things off in Great Lake City, and have them pair up once again with the other most important family in this series. So even though this is not the episode that's ending the list, I still think it was a nice episode to end the arc. Number 2. Honestly, these last 2 episodes I love about the same amount. It was only a few minor things that made me separate them. So the episode that takes home the silver medal is...
You're not the president.
Bosley Bullsworth's the name, and I am the president.
What
now? Of the White House Tour Guide Association.
Bringing down the house. In this episode, the Louds from the Loud House are visiting the White House. As they are told by this crazy guy who acts like a bulldog, who for some reason also looks like the fat controller, not to touch anything. As you could probably guess, some of them go and touch things. But this honestly leads into why I love this episode so much. This episode is a better version of Cover Girls, which means it goes here on the fanfic-o-meter, slightly below Sister Act. As each time one of the Louds want to go do something, their sibling will end up covering for them and is the one who encourages them to go and be happy in the first place. And it reinforces the main thing I love about this show in general. Like, even though what they're doing is technically bad and breaking the rules, it's so nice to see the siblings care for each other's interests and wants to see the other happy and succeed in their passions. And I really want more episodes to actually do this. But it's sweet to see here. Of course, in Loud House fashion, while they were gone, they kinda accidentally broke important things, and they have to quickly go and fix those problems before their tour guide, the Bulldog, finds out and locks them in the dungeon, because apparently they have one of those. I could kinda give the criticism that it seemed like they were able to fix their problems way too quickly and suffered absolutely no consequences for it, but this is one of those times I could chalk things up to just cartoon logic. Just like how I could jokingly criticize that this episode uses the hit era 3 strikes formula. But it's not really that much of a problem to me, because I do like that the Louds who messed up came clean that they did to Rita. And overall, this episode just has more things that I like. Like I said, I love the family bond being on full display. I love that the Louds were able to admit to their faults and tried to fix them. I find the location they're at to be interesting, the humor of the episode was funny, and once again being another good version of Cover Girls, showing that the episode's plot was actually really good, it was just everything else with the episode. And the episode even ends with the Louds getting to see the president, though we don't get to see the president, but knowing this show, he probably would have looked something like this.
I'm one of those generic presidents they use on TV to keep shows from becoming dated.
Oh, well, pleased to meet you, Mr. Generic President.
But overall, I guess you could say, positively this time, that the episode's name was correct. Number 1. You know, it just occurred to me that anyone who's seen this arc knows exactly what number 1 is once I revealed what number 2 was. Unless people didn't see this arc and therefore they get to be surprised. As my favorite episode of the arc is...
This is my chance to be a star in a real-life movie! Oh!
Screen Queen. Yes, the Lola Loud-centric episode is my favorite of this arc. Upon arriving in Hollywood, Lola ends up coming across the studio where they make the Dakota Rona movies, which it turns out she's actually a huge fan of. And, just her luck, turns out they need a new young actress to play her, so Lola seizes the opportunity. Unfortunately, they only want high-profile child actors to play the new Dakota Rona, so Lola manages to get her family to help her out. And once again, I do love seeing the family bond of them being willing to help Lola out with her dreams of stardom. Eventually, Lola does get the part, but unfortunately for her, it turns out the filming process isn't as smooth sailing as she thought it was going to be, as she has to do all her stunts. On top of that, she also learns that being a star isn't as easy as she thought it was going to be. This all builds up until she wants to quit, but unfortunately it turns out that since she signed a contract, I don't think that's legal by the way, she is unable to just quit. So instead, with the help of her and her family, she manages to get herself fired and they continue off on their vacation. This is another episode that really reinforces why Lola became one of my favorite characters in this show, as I actually do like seeing her get her chance at stardom and learning her message of the dangers of it and why she shouldn't just rush into fame, which for Lola is a good message to teach. I also liked Lola during the filming process of the Dakota Rhoda movie, and as most of her sane fans have mentioned, Lola does look adorable in that outfit. The only true problem I have with this episode is that honestly, Lola being a movie star could have gone on a bit longer. It takes a bit of the episode before she truly gets the part, and we only get to see her work on one scene. Which is also why the ending's pretty rushed as well. Which is a sentiment I kinda have with a lot of episodes in this arc. Go figure. But overall, I still think this to be a fun episode, and the funnest episode in this whole arc. But honestly, it is my bias talking. Lola is one of my favorite characters, so naturally, the episode about her would probably be my favorite. So overall, I'd say this arc was okay. Much like with the Loud House movie, I'm giving this arc a lot more leeway than I usually would because it's the first time the show is really trying something like this. So I feel like any hiccups, or more like bumps in the road that it ran into, can be excusable because it's their first time. And I say first time because I really do hope the show tries something like this again. I'm not asking for the Loud House to become a serialized adventure. I'm okay with it still being an episodic show that anyone can jump into at any time. I'm just saying I kinda wish they would do more story-driven arcs every now and again. I think once or twice a season wouldn't be too much to ask, especially considering how it doesn't look like this show's going anywhere anytime soon, which for me, that's a good thing. Despite it being kinda wishy-washy with its continuity, I do like that the Loud House has a continuity. To an extent, there was no reason for Rocky to disappear the way he did. His brother is a main character. But overall, even though the show has a status quo, I do like it when shows have some form of continuity, letting us see how the characters grow and change over time. I think I could speak for everyone when I say that is infinitely more rewarding as a long-time viewer. Now, I'm your average bonehead Jay, and I wish you all good night.